Susan! Woohoo! How are you doing? So it's been a couple of years since, a bit like what you're saying, a couple of years since Spoken Live. I've actually done a couple of gigs, but mostly it's been shouting at the telly for 2 years. So excuse me if I'm a tiny bit out of practice. But so I wanted to talk to you about a few things today. So as Scott was kindly saying, we've had a tough couple of years. I mean, let's all acknowledge that. It's really been tough for most of us. But, now is the time where we need to really sort of knuckle down and use our currency. And our currency is energy. And the currency we've got to find is dynamic energy, because that is what will actually get you through. So you're not your age. Your energy is absolutely holds true. So today, let's just make this the best year of your health. So I just wanted to do a little bit about me. I think somebody said, who was it? Somebody quite famous, like some actress said, "That's enough about you. Now, what do you think about me?" So I always think that's a pretty good line. Anyway, so I've been doing this actually 22 years. I'm what I call a corporate nutritionist, but my actual foundation is in clinic. So I actually started as a nutritionist that does clinical work. And that's really important because we're like health detectives getting to the bottom of health problems by using sometimes diagnostic testing. So it's a really, really, really exciting field. So it's not about turning up at your doctor's ill. And of course, there's always a place for doctors, so don't get me wrong. But we are like, if, for example, you had a thyroid problem, the place to go is your doctor, obviously. But we are like the health detectives saying, what is it that is causing your thyroid problem? So we're looking at things like nutrition deficiencies. We're looking at adrenal stress. So that's stress. We're looking at deficiencies like iodine. We're looking at all these different components that make up why it is you are sick. So I do have a clinic in Harley Street. I saw about 8,000 patients. We used to call them patients then. And it's such a rewarding thing to do because you're literally changing lives through being this health detective. And but about, I suppose, probably 20 years ago, I started to speak in corporates. So my first gig was the Bank of England. And so I've done things like Warner Games, Warner Games, I think, who else have I done? Loads and loads of people, lots of construction industry, people like Skanska, people like Crown Estates and all sorts of people over those 20 years. But I mean, the important thing of that really is about being nimble. I think we were talking about, sort of how you get to where you get to on that ladder, on that journey. But it's really about being really adaptable, really sort of creative and creating new possibilities. Because in my industry, 97% of all nutritional therapists, which is the type of nutritionist I am, fail. So 97% after the first 4 years actually will not be working in nutritional therapy anymore. So they just come straight out of the industry because we have to make our living professionally, in effect, through freelance. We're not associated like lots of... So if you were working in the NHS as a dietitian, for example, you'd be employed. We're never employed, usually, unless you work for a supplement company or something like that. You're never employed. So we have to create it all. So it's continually reinventing it. So how I got to do corporate speaking was that continual reinvention of myself, continually looking for sort of trends, if you like. And I mean, a big trend at the moment in corporate well-being, as you all may know, is mental health. And whilst we don't want to dismiss mental health, absolutely not, what people miss out is your body is actually joined to your head. No! Kate, tell us something you didn't know. So you've got this sort of idea that it's mental health like some globby old head kind of travelling through time. Do you know what I mean? Separated from the body. So sort of, like through like, the machine, the computer, the machine, And you sort of go through the machine like that. And you arrive in this space like that doesn't even exist. And suddenly it's all sort of like... Let's talk to you. And as if you don't, as a body, exist. Does anybody get that? You know what I mean? And it's like, actually, Do you want me to? Like, and it's like, it's like, hello, how are you? I'm fine. And it's like this body doesn't exist. And then it's sort of, because as I say, it's in mental health, and there are lots of things like mental health ambassadors, that's all really, really good. But it's kind of like, we've identified a problem, which I don't know if anybody works in corporate, but it's sort of like, oh my God, this person might have mental ill health. Quick, here they are. I've found one. Like, great. Now what? It's like you're on your own. So quite often they don't have the solutions for the problems they're finding in corporates. That's what I find anyway. So I suppose my mission is to unify the body up with the head, which is to say, actually, so much of mental ill health has to do with physical well-being. So it starts with the foundation of nutrition. It absolutely starts like that. So it's sort of trying to get people to realise that the foundation of any mental ill health or physical ill health is to do with this physical foundation. I got puffed out, didn't I? So it's building this foundation on nutrition, and it's absolutely the foundation of health is the nutrition. So actually talking about those cycles I've gone through. So I've literally been in corporate for 20 years, and look, I'm a bit of a Marmite, in corporate because because I'm not very corporate at all, and I come on and go, yes, yeah, come on, I'm now going to sing a song and do all sorts of weird stuff. People either think, God, I love that woman, or they hate me, But anyway, so now I'm sort of transitioning out in a way to do something, not do something else, but that continual creativity is to say, actually, I'm creating a new thing, which is called Be Sensational. And it's Be Sensational at 60, because I'm 60. So it's about adventure, it's about curiosity, it's about a purpose, and it's about energy. And it's going to be my tribe taking us forward to be this dynamic womanhood, which is what it's all about. Because at 60, let me tell you, in the nutrition game, there's people who are much younger than me doing this, who are sort of the typical nutritionist profile, deliciously Ella, or somebody. So, there's a chance for us to be really real and to be real nutritionists and to be really people who help people, real people, not to aspire to something that we sort of should be doing, like having super green smoothies every 2 minutes. And by the way, I'm a nutritionist, so of course I have super green smoothies, but not all the time, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's by way of introduction to say, I've been very adaptive and creative throughout my career. And so I've been a writer. So I've written about 8 books. I did a TV programme. I've done a TEDx talk, which was horrible, by the way. I'm an anthropologist. So I've done an MA in anthropology of food, which is all about cultures and cultures in food and the way culture interacts with how we look at, say, farming and agriculture, the base form of what makes good nutrition, that's working back, if you like, to looking at taking care of our environment through good soil health and good nutrition that way. So there you go. That was a bit of a long introduction. How am I doing for time? That's like, So what I want to give you today really is a little bit of kind of stuff, something to take away with you, something sort of inspirational, because I think I'm actually on the motivation section. I wanted to give you something to take away. It's like not motivated anybody so far, but I wanted to give you a bit to take away with you today so that you can just use that tool. Is that okay? Yeah? Yep. So, because what I was saying is actually, in corporates especially, basically eating healthy is actually flipping boring, isn't it, really? I mean, you either do it and you're really into it, or actually it's flipping boring. So we want to look at sort of healthy eating, or I don't really like the healthy eating thing. But anyway, we want to look at that sort of energy creation through this lens of actually what it can do for you. Do you see what I mean? Because actually the benefits is what sells you, not really that you're going to eat a carrot. Carrots are boring. So what makes it this passionate kind of desire to really use that as something, a channel which you can really change your life through? And when I was in a previous career, so I only started to be a nutritionist at 38, I was actually an interior designer. And I hated interior design because I'm not flipping interested in people's curtains. So I was in totally the wrong career. But at that time, I was probably about 28 when I was an interior designer, and I worked for somebody called Miss McLean. And if you worked in interior design at that time, you always had a designer, you know, who would sort of, the lady who was quite, you know, sort of like this. And she was called Miss McLean, and she was very strict. And Miss McLean and I did the Turnberry Hotel, that's our claim to fame, which now Trump owns, by the way, in Scotland. And she would be so tired, we'd both be so tired that we would both go to sleep in our soup at night. You know, this, oh, how did the curtains go in room 36? You know, like, and we would just go into this kind of whatever we were eating at the time, because our blood sugar, our energy thermometer was so off. Basically, we just did not have any energy for anything. We would just collapse at night, have no energy to do anything. So basically, I realized at that time that energy currency is absolutely everything. And that's what you've got to trade on. Because without that, you are nothing. We are nothing. Because you can't, you can't do anything without that prospect of enthusiasm, with dynamic energy, with something that actually sort of gets you, motivated to be able to get out of bed and really attack the day and attack your businesses or attack whatever you're going to do in your life. You must have that energy currency there. So that's the thing, is to look at the benefits of nutrition, not to look at the carrots. The carrots, snoozeworthy. In my opinion. It might be different for other people. So with a balanced blood sugar, which is what we're going to do in a minute, is that you can get this amazing sleep. So somebody was talking about sleep, and it's true that there are different people sleep at different times. People are sort of... people are almost born with that type, who you are, whether you're an owl or a lark, and actually there's lots of different definitions in between. But it helps if you have a balanced blood sugar, because if you're waking up in the night kind of like that, it's likely that your blood sugar is not balanced. Also, I'm not sure what that woman's doing on the beach. Oh, stable mood. It's like, who's she anyway? Is she related to me? So stable mood. So if you've got a stable mood, again, if you have blood sugar that isn't balanced, you can feel very blue. You can literally feel depressed. So it's a biochemical thing. It's not really a sort of like, come on, pull yourself out of this. What's wrong with you? It's actually biochemistry. You can just feel really, really depressed and low. So, of course, brain health now, actually Alzheimer's it's called diabetes type 3. So it's about, and it's not the only reason, but it's a misbalanced blood sugar. Of course, we've talked about energy, but the main thing is this also about inflammation of the brain. So if you've got an inflamed brain through misbalanced blood sugar, you will have things like depression, feeling low, brain won't work. So you must have that energy currency. So yeah, we're going to talk about the guiding star of nutrition, which is, and we'll go into in a second, which is nutrition these days can become very tribal. So it means that, there's vegans and there's carnivores. Actually, there's a guy called, get this, I'm called Kate Cook and I'm in nutrition. And he is a carnivore and he's called Saladino. I mean, what are the chances? Anyway, this Saladino is actually a carnivore. He does something called the carnivore diet. And there are other people who do vegetarianism, or there's the Pegan diet, which is a mix between vegan and paleo. And there's paleo. And everybody thinks, like they've got it. It's all about, you hear, it's all about plant-based eating, or it's all about this and that, is the sort of key to health. It's like, yes, it's a plant-based diet, or yes, it's a meat-based diet, which seems really odd to us when we've been taught about the plant-based eating thing. But actually, when you look at it, all over the world, people eat very diverse diets, including people up, the indigenous people of the North Pole who are eating, wherever they are, not quite the North Pole. Where are they? You know what I mean. What do you call those people? Inuits. Not people who live in the North Pole, one bloke, Father Christmas. No, not him. But basically people who live in the Inuit folk who are eating seal blubber, basically, and eating a bit of moss that they find. But basically it's a meat-based diet. Or people who eat, people in Kenya, for example, the Maasai, who are eating milk and blood as part of their diet. So it's not all about how we in the West see diet as it's got to be about plant-based eating, because it's a very diverse landscape and humans can survive on quite a lot of different diets, actually. But the one thing remains key to all of these diets is that we must actually balance the blood sugar. So it confuses us about what we've got to do. Okay, I'm going to give you a strategy about what we must do. So a sort of rules for food, basically. So as I was saying, well, it's all a bit tribal at the moment, it's right and it's wrong. And it's how we work at the moment in these polarized positions. It's kind of good or bad or right or wrong, as in tend to look at the diversity, which is, what we were talking about just now, about diversity. Diversity goes also for diversity in diet, diversity in landscape. What happens when you have a diverse diet, actually, in terms of sustainability? Because, we're getting rid of huge landscapes of actually diverse food by being sort of rigid on one thing. So, for example, I think in the Middle Ages, before the Middle Ages, the diet was quite diverse, lots of different plant formations of what we were eating. By the Middle Ages, we weren't eating leeks and pigs. That's why they were about that tall, basically. But, so you need a diverse diet, you need a diverse way of looking at diet, and also realise that actually there's a sort of this guiding star that goes through everything, but actually it doesn't matter what you do outside that. Does that make sense? I've stopped being sort of like nervous now. It's really odd. I haven't, I've been doing this for 25 years and I was actually quite nervous speaking to you. So sorry about like that. I think I've calmed down a bit now. That's really good. Because I could, well, yeah, no, I'm not sure actually. I could burst because I look very like one of the Nolan sisters. As anybody's old enough to remember that. I do. She's a Bernadette, as it happens, actually. I once saw myself in a taxi. I was driving along, I saw a taxi with my face on it. I was like, how did I don't remember doing that. It was Bernadette Nolan for Aer Lingus. Anyway, I digress. Thank God I can't sing, they're saying. So basically, blood sugar is what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to give you this rule for food. So basically, in summary, I'm saying there's lots of different ways of eating. There really are. And it doesn't mean to say it's right or wrong. It really doesn't. Again, we've got this thing about plant-based eating now, and that is trotted out. Everybody says plant-based eating. Eat a plant-based diet. Actually, some plants are toxic. They really are. So actually, when you eat kale, for example, it's actually forms kidney stones. You have to, when you're putting it in your smoothie, if you do that sort of thing, like delicious Vienna, make sure you have the cooked version, which you can buy frozen, because when you cook it, it gets rid of the oxalates and you don't get the kidney stones. So, it can be that some plants actually give us, they're toxic. So there's a reason why we don't eat them raw. And there's a reason why we have quite a diverse diet. So don't believe everything you're told. That's what I mean about diet, especially. Look into yourself and realise that there's a lot of diversity and room for diversity in diet. So yeah, blood sugar control. How am I doing for time?
You've got 8 minutes left.
8? Rats! I was going to give you the secret life, but there's not time, so I'm off. No, it's all right. I'll give you the secret life. Right, so blood sugar. So this is our guiding star, right? This is our absolutely guiding star in nutrition. So as we know, when you eat food, basically, it's creating energy. We said that's our currency, so we want that. Now, our body is run by glucose. This is a simplified story, obviously. So we have about a teaspoon of sugar in the blood at any one time. So let's pretend, which drives your cells. That's a kind of good thing. But let's pretend you had a Lucozade. And I know you don't do that while playing your games in your basement, but whatever you do. But let's say you had a Monster drink, which I don't know how many teaspoons of sugar in a Monster. Does anybody know? Too many, absolutely. Well, a Lucozade is about 8 teaspoons of sugar. But imagine we've come from this biochemistry of a cave person. So we're basically a cave person. And what happens is that as a cave person, you wouldn't have come across sugar very often. So you would have had honey, you would have had fruit, you would have had all sorts of things, but you wouldn't have a Lucozade. So when you have a Lucozade, what happens is that you're allowed 1 teaspoon of sugar, but you get 8 teaspoons of sugar suddenly coming into the system. And literally you get this huge spike, a roller coaster of blood sugar. I don't think I've got a picture of a roller coaster, but you'll have to imagine it. So basically you get a roller coaster of blood sugar that looks like this. And at the top of the curve, you're like, way, this is, woohoo! And then what comes up must go down. So what happens is your blood sugar plummets, and at the bottom of the curve, you think to yourself, you might not actually be thinking this, by the way, but that's sort of biochemically what's happening. And the blood sugar is lowered by a hormone called insulin. So insulin is lowering that reaction in the blood, okay? So if you can imagine for 1 minute, I don't know if anybody read The Beano? Anybody reads The Beano? I think it's The Beano, who have the numbskulls in it. Do you know the numbskulls? Yeah. So that, thanks. I did, yeah. Yes. That's like, what's she talking about now? The numbskulls are basically a character. They're characters that lived in this bloke's head, tiny little figures that looked out through his eyes like this, that basically controlled everything he did. So it's like, if he's going to lift a leg, these numbskulls were doing that, sort of like this, like that. So you can imagine that. Obviously, it's not really numbskulls controlling you, although I think they probably are. What happens is you have the Lucozade, and then suddenly, whoosh, off you go on the roller coaster. Suddenly this hormone insulin is coming in and lowering the sugar in the blood. It's like, oh my God, panic! Like, and the little numbskulls are going, oh, phew. And they put the fire out. So if you can imagine that going on the whole time in your system. So basically we've got to control that. That sort of peaks and troughs, because although you might not actually even feel it, because your biochemistry is quite adept at actually not making you feel like that's happening, but it is happening. And so when it's happening, you're storing fat because it's a fat storage hormone. You're actually creating inflammation in the body. You're creating these not being able to sleep by the sort of boiler plug. It's almost like a thermostat. So it's kind of like the thermostat moves too low and suddenly it's like, bang, wake up, bang. What's wrong with you? It's like, poof. We're like, oh my God, I must have had a bad dream. But it's blood sugar, basically, that can cause that. There can be some other stuff as well. So, right, so what's the solution? You need to eat food that is, no, I'll do it the other way around. So avoid food that is sweet, fluffy and white. Okay? Popcorn is a brilliant example of fluffy and white, and also sweet, if anybody chose the sweet version of that. I shall be coming round afterwards with a stick. So basically, sweet. So although it's low calorie, it's very high burn. So it's almost how quickly food burns in the system. So sweet, what does that mean? Anything that you put in your mouth that's sweet is sweet, basically. Fluffy is the density. the popcorn, and white is basically processed food or food that doesn't have really many nutrients in it. Because nutrients slow down the burning process, and also other things will slow down the burning process. So you need things that burn slowly in the system. And sometimes you may have heard it called the glycemic index or glycemic load, but that's for another day 'cause it's a bit more complicated. So we're sort of throwing a few babies out with the bathwater here. But basically, avoid food that is sweet, fluffy and white. And what you're going for is food that is thick, fibrous protein fat. So up you get, up, up, up. You don't have to if you don't want to play, by the way. Okay, okay. It's a bit too late now, isn't it? I'd love to see you do this with a teacup. So, you ready? So what are you going for? Thick, fibrous protein fat. Thick, fibrous protein fat. Thick, fibrous protein fat. Thick, fibrous protein fat. Woo! So you're going for things that are thick, fibrous protein fat. And what that means is the thickness is the density. So the more it takes you, the better it is. Because that slowness of the chew is the blood sugar going into the system really slowly. So you need to have it going slowly. So fibrous, things covered in skin, protein, well, you know what that is, including vegetarian protein, we'll bung it in here. And the other thing is fat. Fat is back. So that's butter, coconut oil. They think actually, interestingly, and for another day, that fat is probably a bigger killer than sugar. So omega-6 fats, which are inflammatory, and you should have a balance in the diet, but in the modern diet, we have a lot of omega-6 fats. Don't worry too much about that. And it's called an essential fat, but it's an omega-6 fat. It's inflammatory. And omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. And because of our genetics, so when we got down from the trees and we started cutting our feet, we didn't need so much inflammation. So we have this raging inflammation, which is probably the bottom of all degenerative disease, is this inflammation. So they think actually the fat is the biggest thing that's killing you. I mean, there was a whole story of sugar as well. And for another day, I'll tell you about that because it was all about how one man captured the fat and sugar argument and basically took us down a path for 50 years in the wrong direction in nutrition. And he was called Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys. But anyway, so it took us down the wrong direction because everybody knows, and the nutritionists amongst us will know, that basically if you pour fat down the human guggle, it's not the same as pouring it down a sink. What kind of idiots do they take us for? You know, it's like there used to be an advert. Do you remember that, anybody? It's like, if you eat fat, you're basically gonna kill yourself because it's gonna bang up the pipes. Like a sink. Really? No. Because we have digestive systems, we have livers, and we have all sorts of other things that process fat, unlike a drain. So anyway, so fat is probably a huge, huge thing, and probably is one of the hugest impacts in human health for this century, and for another time. So the benefits of balancing blood sugar we've talked about. So is basically, it's the answer to life. And that's it. It is the answer to life because it's better sleep, it's more stable mood, it's weight loss, it's mental stability, so mental good health. And at least it's the boundaries of that. Because what I should have said at the beginning is that actually, I started off as the interior designer with Miss McLean, but I got into nutrition really through kind of, and it sounds really cheesy, but self-development, that sort of area. So lots of nutritionists come to nutrition because they're sick as parrots. I was never sick as a parrot. I mean, by the way, sorry if you are sick as a parrot, but I wasn't. I came to it because I wanted to be my best. I wanted to be this person. I wanted to be kind of, not on the world stage, I don't mean in an arrogant way, but changing lives, changing people. And with energy, you can do that because you get out of flipping work and you do things like you contribute to your community, you contribute, like my city is Chichester. Woo, Chichester, West Sussex. And we've contributed, like in the pandemic, it's not just me, but a gang of people. We've contributed, like we formed a restaurant. We started a restaurant for low-income people to be able to eat with dignity. That got closed down in the lockdown. But anyway, we did takeaway in the end. But we did it with this charity called UK Harvest, which does real food, in effect. So not just tins of crappy food, which, of course, people need to sometimes go to, like the food bank, has increased 400% over the time in Chichester. So, things like that. We did Chichester Day, where we had a party at the end of the, basically thanking all the NHS folk and all the people of the community. It was called Over the Rainbow, and it was the sweetest thing ever. But you have the energy to be able to do that, not just to flip and get out of work, not to flip and just feed your family, but to really make a difference. So this, all through nutrition, is the foundation for life. It's like going through a valley in black and white and ending up through this incredible sort of nirvana in colour, where everything's different, where you see everything different, and all possibilities are there for you to just grab. So with that, I say thank you and good night.
Thank you.
I think I've got to go on your trampoline more, basically. So, no trampoline.
Okay, right. Any questions?
Right, I'm off. See you.
No, we have questions.
Oh,
we have questions.
sorry.
A lady in the 3rd row there.
Hi, Kate.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
This is a little bit slightly off of the main topic, but
Yeah, go on.
you could have incredible insight about, and I'd love your opinion. I work with organisations on their company culture, working around emotional
Yeah.
intelligence. But one of the things that comes up time and time again in the workplace is that awkwardness about talking about mental health versus physical health. So one of the things that we try to do is look at their language and start talking about mental health as if you're talking about
Yes.
mental health, 'cause it's so much easier to do, right? So I wonder what your tips would be, given that you kind of got amalgamation going on here and a really great understanding, how you would tell people sort of approach that.
Yeah, I mean, okay, as an anthropologist, no. So it's interesting because I was talking with Kate. It's easy because Kate's called Kate, so I can remember her name. Basically, same as me. But we were talking in the break about anthropology. So I'm also studying anthropology, as I said, and I did medical anthropology, and medical anthropology is that culture of medicine. So I won't get into that too much to say it's just a mind warp, that, because there's something called the DSM, which is a manual, a statistical manual of mental illness, basically. And over the years, it's gone from this to this, basically. So everything's added to in the DSM. And now that's not to dismiss people who've got mental health problems at all, but sometimes it is about ordinary distress. So emotional health, not mental health. And it's a big thing for me. I'm in a completely losing battle on this, by the way, which is people talk about mental health, mental health, mental health. And it can be about the medicalisation of mental health. So, for example, somebody was talking about the menopause. And I just did a presentation, actually, for a big company about menopause, by the way. And we were and in that presentation, although that was another shouting at the telly job, so I'm not sure how it went down. But basically, it's like, can't see what people are thinking about it. But it's quite interesting because we were looking at it culturally, which is in Japan, they don't have a diagnosis of menopause. It's actually called something like, I'll get this wrong, just transitioning into an amazing place where the rainbow and the sun shines constantly and you're an amazing person sort of word, which is, I just think is amazing. In other words, it's not diagnosed as menopause. It's not to say you don't suffer the symptoms. It's just the categorization of it. And that's the thing about anthropology, I suppose, which is it can feel like your lived experience is being pretty much dismissed. But it's not. It's really saying about how we label things in the West. And we have to be really careful with that, because you bunch somebody to, however you flavour it, mental health does not have a good ring about it. It really doesn't. So you need to start talking about emotional health and realise that all of us have been through an extraordinary situation, an extraordinary time where we are ordinary people going through extraordinary, changing and difficult times. It doesn't make us mentally ill or have a mental health problem that we can then look up in the DSM. That's the big thing, and we can give people tools for this. That's the amazing thing. With mental health, really what you're saying is, as I was I wasn't joking about it, but you know what I mean? I was alluding to the fact that we then say, have you got mental health problems? Have you got them? Right, we found one. Here it is. And it's so, nobody puts up their hand and says, oh, I'm having problems. Because you don't really want the mental health label, even though you may desperately need help. So we can give people tools, not only nutritional tools, but all the well-being tools, like, what you were saying, Kim, weren't you, about, and I'm, by the way, I have got a rebound, I've got to get it out of the shed. But, but basically, amazing for the lymph, obviously, so to move the lymph around, which is a static system you need to move around. But basically, those kind of tools that can transform people's emotional health from and away from the stigma of mental health, however much we're trying to destigmatise it. I'm sorry, it still stigmatises it. Yeah. So, thank you.
OK, I know there are more questions, but we've actually got a panel coming up. We're actually going to bring Beatrice back onto the stage, because I think a lot of the questions are probably going to be relevant for both. So thank you very much, Kate. We'll bring Beatrice back on as well now as well.